कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहम् श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जना. So today we will enter a new chapter of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So we will first read out the portion and then we will go to the discussion. It's October 28, 1882. It was Saturday, celebrated each autumn and spring, was being held in Beni Madhav Pal's beautiful garden house at Sithi, about 3 miles north of Calcutta. The house stood in a secluded place, suited for contemplation. Trees laden with flowers, artificial lakes with grassy banks, the green arbors and her fleecy clouds were turning gold in the light of the setting sun. The master arrived. Many devotees had attended the morning devotions, and in the afternoon, people from Calcutta and the neighboring villages joined them. Whom the master loved dearly was one of the large gathering of members of the Brahma Samaj, who had been eagerly awaiting Sri Ramakrishna's arrival. When the carriage bringing the master and a few devotees reached the garden house, the assembly stood up resplendent silence like that which comes when the curtain in a theatre is about to be rung up. People who had been conversing with one another now fixed their attention on the master's serene face, eager not to. At the sight of Shivanath, the master cried out joyously, "Ah, here is Shivanath. You see, you are a devotee of God. The very sight of you, glad, very happy to meet another." Very often they embrace each other in an exuberance of joy. So that's something which we find in the scriptures mentioned. Sri Ramakrishna's life itself is, if you have read the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, where we find a very nice episode where liberated from his very birth, an illumined soul. The moment he took birth, he left his hearth and home. He was the son of Vyasa. He went deep into the forest and he was the Atman. And now, just to cut the long story short, in the meantime, for years, there was no news of Shukadeva, the religion of the Bhagavatam, to the humankind. He was in search of someone who is a pure soul. He has composed the Bhagavatam being instructed by Rishi Narada, who will spread this message. Now there was a need of a very pure soul, untainted by worldliness. And then suddenly he remembered his own son, he was in a deep forest. Immediately he thought that the message of Bhagavatam, if at all it is going to be effective for humankind, it has to be preached by an extremely pure soul. Why he thought of Shukadeva? He was absorbed in the contemplation of the Atman. He was a jnani. There was no worldly taint in him. Now, if such a soul spreads the message of Bhagavatam, it will be accepted by the humankind. And especially, we find the divine sport of the gopis with Krishna, which, to understand in its proper import, needs a very pure mind. Otherwise, just like an worldly love, that it's a pure love where there is no trace of lust, that has to be preached by someone who is beyond all the worldly attachment, or to get him. So the story goes that Shukadeva selected one of the slokas of the Bhagavata which he himself has composed. The sloka starts as Varaha Pirang Natavara Vapu. Body is like, that's the description of Krishna. He is a very extremely handsome, beautiful. He is the Gopala who, along with the other cowherd boys, in the morning has went to the bush, the forest, to graze the cows. Because by the hoof of the cow, the dust has started spreading in the sky. So there was a spray of dust, and Krishna was returning, playing on his flute, accompanied by all the cowherd boys, the gopas, and while returning he was purifying by the touch of his feet the soil of Vrindavan. So it's a very sublime sloka, which now he called the cowherd boys and the Rakhalas, the cowherd boys, and told them that my son must be somewhere deep in the forest. I don't know where he is. The best way to find him out, this is the cowherd boys, the sloka, depicting the beauty of Krishna, depicting that particular scene where Krishna is returning with other gopas, with other cowherd boys, back to Vrindavan. So that's the sloka which he made all the cowherd boys to memorize and taught them how to chant it, and then asked them to go deep into the forest and chant it. So they asked, why? Well, you just go and do it. You will find that you go to the deep into the forest, you will find someone who is in deep meditation, deep contemplation. It's impossible to break that contemplation. He will be coming out from the meditation. And then he will be asking that who has composed this? And when he asks, you see him, and he will be eager to see the composer because he will be full of that devotion, exuberant devotion. So when he will be eager to meet the composer of this sloka, then bring him to me. So that's how Vyasa Shukadeva. And that's the description goes there, that hearing that sloka, the one who was in deep meditation, he came out of his meditation, there was horripilation in his body, tears were flowing down his eyes, he was exhausted. And as Vyasa planned, that's what happened. He asked that who has composed, and that's how Vyasa was again reunited by his son, and then he taught him Bhagavatam, and he's the one who preached the Bhagavatam to the humankind. So why we are just relating this story here? Just to say that Sri Ramakrishna's life is a reflection of the scriptures. You find that it do happen, absorbed in the deep meditation. when he hears the chant of the divine, he comes down from that exalted state, that the play of the divine is so enchanting that even Atma Ramascha Munaya, the Muni who is totally absorbed in his self, Nirgrantha, whose all the knots of his heart has fallen off, even ignore this Ahaituki Bhakti. Ahaituki Bhakti, the Bhakti for which there is nothing, there is no selfishness. That generally our devotion has a lot of selfishness, and our devotion to God is to get something of this world. But their devotion is just for devotion. There's a tremendous joy in loving God. They want nothing in return. So that Ahaituki Bhakti, that brings them down. However, Ramakrishna, who has been perfected in so many ways of sadhana, who is to go to samadhi now and then, so he is saying that he sees a devotee whenever there is a scope for conversing on the divine. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. Even in Narada Bhakti Sutra, there is a wonderful sutra, Kantavarodha Romancha Asrubhihi Parashparam Lapamanaha Pavayanti Kulani Prithivincha. That such devotees, supreme devotion, what they do, they exchange notes, Parasparam Lapamana, they exchange notes with one another in choked voice, Kantavarodha, in choked voice, on the end, and Asrubhi, the tears roll down their eyes. They purify the world, they purify their family. So that's the thing which we find in the life of Ramakrishna. To enjoy the bliss of devotion by his communion with the other devotees. By coming in saying, here is Shivnath. You see, you are a devotee of God. The very sight of you gladdens my heart. One hemp smoker, Ramakrishna, the master of examples, the master of allegories. How nice is another. When two human beings are of same temperament, same type of temperament, same likings, when they meet, they feel like surely. And that's what he's speaking, that a hemp smoker feels very happy to meet another. Very often they embrace each other in an exuberance of joy. So hearing that such an example, all that what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. Sri Ramakrishna in some other context, in some other place in the gospel, he says that when one comes down from spiritual realization, the mind is a pure mind, it cannot dwell on worldly things. But at the same time, He used to say that the mind cannot stay in a high note for a long time. That in the Indian music there are 7 notes, sa re ga ma pa dha ni. The new is the high, is in the high note for long. You have to come down. So here also he's saying that the mind has to come down. But when it comes down, he's a pure mind. He cannot, what the mind has to engage in something. In what to engage? He cannot engage in worldly things. He seeks the company of devotees. When he's coming down, the mind has to be engaged in something. And as there is no worldly desire, it always remains in the company of mind. These ideas being explained in these simple words of Ramakrishna. The Master, many people visit the temple garden at Dakshineshwar. If I see among the visitors indifferent to God, I say to them, you had better sit over there, see the beautiful buildings. That's what God is doing with us. There's a wonderful sloka, wonderful mantra in the Mundaka Upanishad. Paranchi khani vyatna antaratman kaschid dhira pratyagatman akshat avritta chakshu amritatva vichan. That the God has inflicted our senses in such a way that it always moves outward. It never sees within. Only a few blessed ones who have learned the art of shutting down their eyes, shutting down the senses and looking within, they alone can realize the Atman. So here also Sri Ramakrishna, when he finds that most of the people, our minds are all dwelling in the worldly things, it's very difficult for them to dive within. So for the majority, those beautiful buildings all laugh. But that's what this we find, that for most of us is the fact. And then Sri Ramakrishna is giving devotees of God are accompanied by worthless people. Their companions are immersed in gross worldliness and don't enjoy spiritual talk at all. Since the devotees keep on for a long time talking with, finding it impossible to sit there any longer, they whisper to their devotee friends, when shall we be going? How long will you stay? The devotees say, wait a bit, we shall go after a little while. Well then, you can talk. We shall wait for you in the boat. So after Ramakrishna is saying that I asked them to go and see the beautiful buildings, don't think that I am harsh to them. That's the thing they want to do. They're actually relieved by those words. Sometimes they're embarrassed that they're as if forced to stay here. Just out of decorum. As they've come with the friends, they cannot move out. So I actually help them by saying, please go and move out, because they cannot stay here. They feel it's so torturing just to sit even for a while to listen to something which is holy, which is something divine, which speaks of devotion. They're not of the temperament. He's the master of allegory. He's the master of parables. What a nice parable he's illustrating in some other context in the gospel. That a fisherwoman was returning from the market after selling the fish. So it was full of the scales of the fish. While selling the fish, the fish has to be cut into pieces, and the scales has to be removed. So all the scales that were remaining, that was in the basket of the fish. The fisherwoman was returning, and suddenly there was a hailstorm, a huge storm, a hailstorm, and she found it's almost impossible to proceed any further. And then she saw another lady, and she was a gardener. She used to stay in a garden. She was a gardener, and her house was near the garden. So this fisherwoman, finding no other way in the hailstorm where to go, so she took off that gardener lady, who happened to be her friend. And this gardener lady, she told that, see, it's impossible for you to go back to your village, to your house tonight. So why not stay overnight here in the garden? And the fisherwoman agreed. And at night, when she lied down, she was restless. She was not getting any sleep. Realized this beautiful fragrance of the flower, she's not habituated with that. That's not she is accustomed to. Every day she goes to sleep with a fishy sleep. She brought that fish basket, which was full of the scales. She sprinkled some water on it and kept it near her head. And with that fishy smell, then she started snoring, had a very sound sleep. For the worldly people, even if you try to keep them in some holy company, in some holy environment, they feel almost suffocated. So, temperament, even if you are forced to be in spiritual atmosphere, sometimes it doesn't help. As in English they say, you can take a horse to the water, but you cannot make it drink. Was indicating that worldly people will never listen to you if you ask them to renounce everything and devote themselves wholeheartedly to God. After having no divine inclination. So for them, it is almost impossible to imbibe those spiritual vibration. But is there no way out? The divine incarnation comes to be compassionate towards, and that's what Sri Ramakrishna will be speaking of. What's the way out? Worldly people, now Ramakrishna is writing something interesting. Worldly people will never listen to you if you ask them to renounce everything and devote themselves wholeheartedly to God. Therefore, made an arrangement to attract the worldly. They would say to such persons, "Come, repeat the name of Hari, and you shall have a delicious soup of magur fish." Many people, attracted by the fish and the woman, would chant the name of God. After tasting a little of the nectar of God's hallowed name, they would soon realize that for love of God, while the young woman signified the earth, the embrace of the woman meant rolling on the ground in the rapture of divine love. So in Bhagavatam, in one of the slokas it is mentioned, Yena Tena Prakarena, that the thief never thinks of some righteous way of stealing. In whatever way it's possible, by hook or by crook, some corner of the house, he will find out some way by hook or crook to steal it. So similarly, in Bhagavatam it is stressed that for keeping your mind in God, for keeping your mind in God, to be devoted to God, to keep your emotions, your devotion fixed, by hook or by crook, keep your mind in the divine. And that's what we find Chaitanya and Nitai is doing. They use the worldly lure as make the child do something which is desirable. The mother will be using some lollipops to lure them. So with that, they will be lured, will be motivated to do which is desirable. Speaking of these worldly pleasures, that you can have a delicacy. The magur fish, it's a delicacy. The embrace of a woman, that speaks of sensual. In that by luring them, what they are making? They're making them to take the name of Lord. And in the process, if you go on taking the name of God, the devotion is bound to sprout. It has been very nicely mentioned that how to develop devotion. I don't have devotion. You say, be devoted to God. How can I be devoted to God? I don't feel that devotion. So very nicely it has been spoken. Ei Harinam Nite Nite Bhakti Mukul Futpechite. So go on taking the name of the Lord. And in the process, if you go on taking assiduously, you will find that the bud of devotion, which is in your heart, has blossomed, it has bloomed. So that's the way. So that's why we find Chaitanya and Nitai, what they're doing, somehow they're making the people take the name of the Lord. They know it for very well. If you go on taking the name of the Lord, the devotion is bound to blossom in your heart. That all those words, this apparent idea of sensuous pleasure, sensual joy, is actually speaking of the fish soup means the tears that you shed for the love of God, and the embrace of the young woman means the earth. You get so exuberant with joy that you start rolling on the idea which we find in the Bhagavatam, that Yena Tena Prakarena, Krishna Mano Niveshayat. That's how nicely has been implemented by the avatars, by the divine incarnation. So they know how to make human being that get to divine love. Nitai would employ any means to make people repeat Hari's name. Chaitanya said, the name of God has very great sanctity. It may not produce an immediate result. A seed that has been left on the cornice of a building. After many days, the house crumbles and the seed falls on the earth, germinates, and at last bears fruit. So this is a very interesting thing. Vivekananda used to say that the entire spiritual journey can be defined with 3 P. Purity, patience, perseverance. Purity speaks of trying to keep the mind in the thought of the divine. And it's not at the beginning. So you go on trying repeatedly. That repeated endeavor speaks of perseverance. And for that you should have patience. It's not a matter of 1 or 2. That perseverance with patience for quite a long time. And then suddenly you will find that the devotion is blooming in your heart. So the name of the divine is very powerful. Sprout into that devotion today or tomorrow. It's extremely powerful. So once you start taking, the sanskaras start growing. Most of us complain that we don't get the environment. That I somehow have developed the idea that there's ineffable joy in renouncing the so-called immediate pleasures of life and to get engrossed in divine contemplation. I have worldly duties that it's not possible for me. So here the answer is that you go on trying your best in whatever situation you are placed, that whatever circumstances it may be, in whatever way it is possible, if you go on taking the name of the God, the sanskara will be formed. And once the sanskara is formed, if you have some, know it for certain, they have to fructify. You have to be gravitated in some environment, today or tomorrow, where all those latent impressions will find expression. So that's the idea of karmashaya in Yoga Shastra they speak of. If you have samskara, that samskara today or tomorrow is going to get that field. You will be gravitated there. That's the way in this life, a good student with the sanskara to study, he has a latent impression. He doesn't get distracted in the worldly thing. He's focused in his studies. There's a good in some reputed university. That huge university is not the product of his endeavor. It was already there. It's a collective endeavor of the entire humankind. Now all his so-called ambition gets fulfilled, that to go to the higher course, from professional course. So two things, sanskara and taking God's name. But at the same time, I feel the circumstances are not favorable. Know it for certain, if I can develop this samskara today or tomorrow, this birth or next birth, I'm bound to get that type of environment. This example, which synthesizes this purushakara and kripa, your own endeavor and grace. In spiritual life, grace do play a great role. Nothing can happen just by our own effort. But when the grace will dawn on us, we don't know. So Ramakrishna used to, and of grace and endeavor, he used to say that there were two farmers. One farmer was a traditional farmer. He believed that what his forefathers have told, he has to follow that. That every year at particular, he is supposed to plow the land. And he plows the land. The other farmer, he thinks himself to be very intelligent. He read the forecast that there is not going to be any rain. So he said, what's the need of plowing? The forecast proves to be wrong. Suddenly there is a huge downpour. And Ramakrishna asks, who will be benefited? The one who has plowed the land will be benefited. So when the rain comes, we don't know. But so God's grace alone is not sufficient. That our endeavor, what we have to do, that should be taken care of. Do our best, God will take care of the rest. Name of the Lord. When you get the favorable ground, the seed was in the roof. It couldn't sprout because it was in the terrace of the building. And one day, in the strong wind, it blew it and it fell in the ground. And then, for years together, it couldn't sprout. Now it started sprouting. So that's what the devotion is. The name of the God is like that seed. It has not yet sprouted. But don't think that it won't sprout. If you go on taking the name of the Lord, a time will come where you will get that favorable ground. The circumstances will be favorable. There will be an upsurge of devotion. So for that, we should patiently wait. We're totally resigning to the divine. Let us do our best. God will take care of the rest. And that's why any means to make people repeat Hari's name. So the sanskara is formed. Chaitanya said, the name of God has a very great sanctity. It may not produce an immediate result, but one day it must bear fruit. It is like a seed that has been days. The house crumbles and the seed falls on the ground, germinates, and at last bears fruit. So how nicely the synthesis of Purushakar and Kripa by the simple words of Sri Ramakrishna. As worldly people are endowed with Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, so also is Bhakti characterized by the three gunas. Now Ramakrishna is his own unique way, its expression in our life. So he's now giving the description of a Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic people. Do you know what a worldly person's house is in a dilapidated condition here and there? He doesn't care to repair it. The worship hall may be strewn with pigeon droppings and the courtyard covered with moss, but he pays no attention to these things. The furniture of the house may be old. He doesn't think of polishing it and making it look neat. He doesn't. But the man himself is very gentle, quiet, kind and humble. He doesn't injure anyone. Again, among the worldly, there are people with the traits of Rajas, 3 rings on his fingers. The furniture of his house is all spick and span. On the walls hang portraits of the Queen, the Prince of Wales, and other prominent people. The building is whitewashed and spotlessly clean. His wardrobe is filled with a large assortment of clothes. Even the servants have their livery and all that. So all the splendor, the glamour, and the traits of the worldly man endowed with tamas are sleep, lust, anger, egotism, and the like. All the things which deludes us. which clouds our intellect. This the sleep, lust, anger, egotism. Similarly, bhakti, now after speaking the three types of gunas as expressed through the three temperaments, the sattvic, rajasic and tamasic, now he will speak, and even in a devotee, that a devotee need not be just sattvic. Even a devotee can be sattvic, rajasic and tamasic. It has been expounded in Bhagavanatraya Vibhaga Yoga. There we find this, it has been elaborately explained there. But here Sri Ramakrishna is explaining in his own unique fashion. Similarly, bhakti, devotion, has its sattva. A devotee who possesses it meditates on God in mosquito net. As he doesn't want to be appreciated, that others should be praising him, that he's a very religious man. He doesn't have that type of motivation, joy, the bliss which comes out of contemplation. He has no worldly view in mind. What to speak of having wealth? Many may say that I meditate, I don't want wealth, I just want to meditate. But maybe there's in his mind the desire for name and fame is lingering. As Swami Vivekananda used to say, that the last thing to bind us is name and fame. It's easy to get rid of lust. It is easy to get rid of our attachment towards name and fame. So here we find that such a devotee, sattvic, he has no external expression. He meditates perhaps inside his mosquito net. Others think he is asleep. Since he is late in getting up, they think perhaps he has not slept well during the night. His love for the body goes only as far as appeasing his hunger, and that only by means of rice, elaborate arrangement about his meals, no luxury in clothes, and no display of furniture. Besides, such a devotee never flatters anybody for money. So it's simple living, high thing. He has nothing to do, his devotion has nothing to do with the worldly gains. He's dispassionate about all the worldly ways of life, and his mind is always engrossed in the contemplation of the divine, but that also he doesn't make a show. If people find an expression of devotion in your life, they will be immediately coming and making you a great person, a holy man. They will be revering you. So he does everything in secret, in silence, so that no one can find out what he's doing. So that's the sattvic type of devotee. He projected that people should see that through his devotion, how he shows off his wealth. That also speaks of the rajasic temperament. Possessed of rajasic bhakti, puts a tilak, a mark of sandal paste or other material to denote one's religious affiliation. So even we find in Chaitanya Charitamrita, they say that the real devotee, fragrance of Krishna, what it means? That all the devotion is within. All this tilak and other things, the marks, the rosary, everything speaks of the fragrance that other people will find out. There will be no external expression. And that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. But the rajasic bhakti, they want approbation, they want acknowledgement, that people should recognize that they are devotees. Forehead and a necklace of holy Rudraksha beads, interspersed with gold ones around his neck. At worship, he wears he wants to show off his devotion. He will be just, carrying his religion as if in his, in his collars, that all can see as if that he is a very religious man. He wants that type of recognition. A man endowed with tam literally extorts boon from God. Even as a robber falls upon a man and plunders his money. Bind, beat, kill. That is his way, the way of dacoits. It is just taking and not giving. In sattvic devotion, it is giving and receiving. You give your devotion to the Lord and secretly you receive that bliss. You don't ask for it, it is there. Rajasic Bhakta has the give and take. That my devotion, that I am just for getting something. Name, fame, wealth. Tamasic Bhakta, he, in his life, what we find, he's a lazy person, he's angry, and that's why he couldn't flourish in life with all those traits. It takes him to some crisis. And in crisis, he has done nothing. No devotional practice, no way that he has not adopted even any secular means to really progress in life, even as far as the worldly achievements are concerned. He has done nothing and he is in danger. He then suddenly starts blaming God. It is because of you everything has happened. It is you who have to save me. So it is only the question of, like a dacoit, He just goes and plunders. Previously plundered your own life, now you're plundering the divine. Just a thief. What he does, he has done nothing to really gain wealth in a positive way. And then he goes and plunders the other man's property. So tamasic bhakti is also something like that. Because of his lazy mind, which is always clouded with inertia, he could in no way flourish in life. But for everything he blames God, and he claims that it is you who have to save me. Bhakti. Because that also, all this helps us. In Bhagavad Gita also it has been mentioned that a bhakta can be sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. That's why we should not think that the sattvic us here has categorized all the three, and all the three are accepted. Why? Because of the basic reason that whether I am rajasic, tamasic or sattvic, somehow that there is something that even as a worldly person, I relate through devotion with the divine, that bhakta. That speaks of the greatness that somehow you acknowledge, which transcends this worldly existence. You have developed an awareness for that. So whatever state you may be, gradually it will take you to that highest spiritual evolution. So no one is left out. So that's the beauty of tantric tradition. It speaks of sublimation, not subjugation. You do not have to force. With whatever nature you have, you can reach the divine. You did not have to relinquish your nature. Just that whatever traits, tendencies you have towards the worldly thing, all those traits you did not have to relinquish. You did not have to stop. Just direct them towards God. And find that after speaking of this three bhakti, Sri Ramakrishna will be saying that even this tamasic bhakti is good. We need not criticize such a person. That his faith in the divine will take, with all his tamasic tendencies, he has a tremendous focus. As in the crisis moment, we get a tremendous focus. Just to give an example, that suppose I was just driving to have a head-on clash. It was just a fraction of a second that thing happened. But that impression you will never forget in life. Because the fear of death, that Christ's mind gets intensely focused. The mark which is kept, which it leaves in your mind is undelible. It cannot be deleted. It is a very strong impression. As that focus, because of his callousness, he falls in such a situation where there is no way out. Now out of that crisis, the tremendous fear that he is going to be drowned, the tremendous focus, somehow he developed the faith in the divine. And that focus is going to create associated with the thought of the divine. And that is going to help him spiritually, evolve him. So it's not blamed. After saying that, we will find Sri Ramakrishna, to exemplify, to extol the tamasic bhakti, will start again to sing in a voice sweet with rapturous love. His eyes turn upward. What's the song? That's the meaning of the song is, why should I go to Ganga or Gaya or Kashi, Kanchi or Prabhas? That's what the regular devotee does. So long as what need the rituals has a man, what need of devotions anymore, if he repeats the mother's name at the 3 holy hours. So just first he says, by taking the name of Kali upon your lips at crisis, the danger. When you're about to leave your life, they say that Maron Kale Harinam. This is very good. Though the life doesn't speak of devotion, but at the moment of crisis, somehow you have that, I'm going to create an indelible mark in your mind. So what's the need of all the rituals and other things if you don't have that intense faith? That Nistarini Devi, one of the lady devotee of Ramakrishna, when she used to visit Belur doing japa for hours together, she will laugh and she used to say, very interesting thing. In Bengali she used to say, Jotoi jop karo dhyan karo, murte janle hoy. You may do japa. What's the use if you don't know the art of dying? Murte janle hoy. So that's the thing which is indicated. That if somehow at the moment of crisis, you have never resorted to so-called conventional religion, but in the bottom of your heart to help you out, is going to liberate you, is going to deliver you. And that makes you take the name of the Lord at the moment of the crisis. Then for such a person, what's the need for rituals? What's the need for devout hours? Rituals may pursue him close, but never can they overtake him. So once you have intense devotion, whether you have rituals or not, the rituals may be following you, but they can never overtake you. Means shadowed by the rituals. That sometimes rituals become the cause for our distance from the divine. There's a very nice Tagore song that Tomar Pujar Chole Tomar, just forget you. With all those elaborate paraphernalia. I just forget you. That Dhuper Mala, Diper Alo, Dhuper Dhoar Pichon Hote, Paine Tomar Choron, Paine Shujuk Choron Choa. So there's a nice Tagore song. The incense stick, the flowers, all those things becomes a barrier. It doesn't allow me to touch your feet. So if the rituals becomes, that's why Swami Vivekananda used to say, it is good to be born in a church, but it is horrible to die there. So all those rituals are good. If the devotion to sprout, if that has not sprouted, what's the use of that? The rituals are secondary. Divine contemplation is primary. That's been indicated by this line, that rituals may pursue him close, but never can overtime. Charity, vows, and giving of gifts do not appeal to Madan's mind. Madan is the composer of this song. So all these charities, vows, this speaks of this conventional religion. That doesn't in any way appeal to him. Why? Because he knows it for certain. His faith in the divine, if not always, will make him think of the divine at the moment of challenges in life. So the blissful mother's lotus feet are his whole prayer and sacrifice. Who could ever have conceived the power her name possesses? Shiva himself, the god of gods, sings her praise with his 5 mouths. So that's the song. So after singing that, the master was beside himself with love for the Divine Mother. He sang with a fiery enthusiasm. If only I can pass away repeating Durga's name, how can thou then, O Blessed One, withhold from me deliverance? Wretched. So now after singing this song, he is relating them to the tamasic devotion. One must take the firm attitude. What? I have chanted the mother's name? How can I be a sinner anymore? I am her child, the higher of her powers and glories. You can realize God with its help. Force your demands on God. He is by no means a stranger to you. He is indeed your very own. So this speaks of this sublimation, not suppression. With the tamasic, for a tamasic person to become sattvic is not easy. We know how difficult it is to transform our nature. So here the scripture prescribes be at home with them. Don't be your own enemy. Be friendly towards yourself. Be kind to yourself. Accept the fact you're of that nature. But with that, you can adopt some way. You can orient your life in such a way that your nature and lead you to the spiritual evolution. And that's the idea behind the worship of the Shakti. All the Shakti worship, like the Mother Durga's puja is called Sarvajanin. It is the Durga worship is for all. The pujari is supposed to be of sattvic temperament. He is doing upavasa, fasting, chanting the name of the Lord, meditating. For him, this puja is prescribed. For Rajasic, yes, for them also, there is a prescription for offering all costly things. All the rich man, they have the scope to relate to the divine by offering costly items. So they also can relate. The tamasic, they also can relate. There is a scope for this sacrifice, bali. Even wine is offered to the mother. They're not saying that this Divine Mother is not for you. So there is a way that mother, when she is going to the battlefield, she has to be in that tremendous, vigorous mood. For that, to a certain extent, intoxication is okay. So that's how the scriptures are prescribed. At the time of immersion, the scriptures has mentioned that all should be entertaining the mother with all sorts of vulgar dance and vulgar words. Why? That how can a worship be related with all those things? The idea is, let all relate to the mother. That these people are of that nature. But if I say that unless you are purified, you cannot worship mother, they will be left out. Let them come, vulgar dance, use those vulgar words, foul language, but still they're relating to the divine. And that with their nature, gradually the devotion will creep in. So just see how compassionate this example that, and it is generally the Shakti worship which is related with this, the divine as if coming down to our level. To explain that, we can explain away, if a small child who has no sense of hygiene, in a playing mood, runs to the gutter, just runs down the gutter and starts having fun and frolic there, to get the child back. So that's what mother is doing. She's coming down as if to our nature. She is beyond all the nature, but she comes down to our nature so that we can relate to her, and then she can pull her up. So that's maybe a tamasic bhakta, but that doesn't mean that it is something which should be censored, which should be criticized. With that also, you can reach the divine. The positive side of it is, it gives a tremendous focus, tremendous resilience, the strength. That mother, you are there. That type of resilience, the grit is there. With tremendous force, he can demand that after all, you are my mother, you have to save me. And that's what is needed. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. That even tamasic bhakta can lead to that spiritual illumination. If he can negativities to the divine, and that negativities will turn into something positive. That will help him to outgrow all his limitations and go beyond all the 3 gunas to be in communion with the divine. So that's wonderful, the simple words, how nicely the scriptures. So we'll continue with it again in the next class. The discussion, the conversation which Sri Ramakrishna is having with the Brahmo devotees. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all.